podcast. Again, we're going through a bunch of the Senate candidates here in Utah. Today, I've got with me Jason Walton. I've got to know Jason over the campaign trail as we were running for governor, and he has been running for the Senate. I mean, I don't think you find a finer guy, and jumping into politics is a tough thing. I know that firsthand, and it's hard to start from zero and get into this game, but I'm glad he did, and it's been a pleasure to get to know him. And the race is still far from over. We're in the middle of the primary here, so we're glad to have you on. Hey, Jace, how are you, man?
Carson, you're a good man. It's really good to be here with you. Getting to know you and some of the other candidates has been one of the best parts of the race.
Yeah, no, and that's really what it's about. I mean, it's getting to know people and see why, and I guess that kind of brings us to the opener. I mean, you're very successful in the private sector. You've done a lot of things. Why get into politics? Well, why does it matter?
Yeah, that's a great question because I've always been extremely suspect of everybody who runs for politics. I've
Right?
had nothing but bad experience myself
Right?
with politicians and corrupt regulators. So I know that the me of 7 years ago would be highly suspicious of the me today. Like, why are you doing this? And I'm literally have come to a point in my life where I'm concerned about the future of America, like deeply concerned. So I feel like a politician when I say, by the way, I'm not comfortable still being called a politician.
Right. It never
But
gets
hey, I put
easy.
my yeah, I filed the paperwork, so I guess I am.
Right.
Um, I'm old school blue collar, so I'm from Monticello, Utah, fifth generation down there. Those are the values that have been impressed into me. Work really, really hard, do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do. And those things kind of worked out for me. I've been very fortunate, being a kid playing on the Blue Mountain down in San Juan County and hanging out in Canyonlands and stuff. I never figured I'd be running for the United States Senate. Didn't figure my life would turn out the way it has. But after graduating from BYU, my wife and I, the short of it is we have accounting degrees. We started this pest control company out of our garage almost over 25 years ago. Literally, we did not come from family money, just the opposite. I grew up living with my aunt and uncle in the basement, shared with a very small house that my grandparents owned and also lived in. And uh, so we didn't have any outside investors. There was I don't have a silver spoon in my mouth, and we just bootstrapped this company. Went long periods where we didn't pay ourselves anything. It was so hard, Carson. But over time, like learning how to balance budgets, meet payroll, come up with a strategic vision, and then learning how the economy actually works. We've been blessed. We built it into one of the largest pest control companies in the United States, and we have thousands of employees. I've been blessed to mentor hundreds of very successful entrepreneurs, not just in my industry, but in other industries. I still do it now. I've mentored thousands of young Utahns. That's not why I'm running though. I'm running because like over the last like 5 or 10 years, a few things have happened. One, in my business, it's been my honor as I've been mentoring these young people to really have the focus of building a foundation on principle centered living, meaning do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And this is like Carson, this is like the main thing of that's going to come to why I'm running right now. Who has the ability to do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do? And in my industry of the last 5 to 10 years, I've seen unbelievable corruption. And Carson, I haven't talked about this much in podcasts, but I mean corruption like where some of the, in my opinion, some of the leading people in my industry should be in prison. And I don't
Sure.
say that lightly. I mean like corrupting, in my opinion, training hundreds, if not thousands, of young people that in the standard operating way have had to do business, to do things that are unethical at best and very illegal and criminal at worst. And as I've tried to rectify that. I'm not going to go into detail about that right now, but I've worked really hard to try to rectify that and found that there's no appetite for it. So it frustrated me. And then
Sure.
3 years ago, I've mentioned this on the campaign trail. My daughter took her own life, and that's been devastating to my family, like extremely devastating. The way
Yeah.
that was handled by BYU, she took her life on BYU's property. They handled it in a way that was, I'm being gentle when I say it was wrong,
Yeah.
like really wrong. They chose not to give us a call, for example, after she took her life on their property. When we started meeting with them, they wouldn't even meet with my other daughter. My only other daughter was coming home from her LDS mission the night before my other daughter took her life, and so I had to call my only other daughter during Christmas holiday while she was going to the airport to come home from her LDS mission, I had to say, "Hey, your only daughter's gone." And then I had to take her to BYU to go to classes a couple weeks later. We begged BYU to help her, to meet with her, to get counseling, and as well as the other people who were involved, and nothing. And so the issue with that was it just made me realize that someone needed to do something. So I stepped up then with my family, and we tried to make that right and tried to come in and help the university. We're still trying to help the university. We're all BYU alum and we're all BYU fans. But I thought it was interesting that my friend said you shouldn't talk about this publicly because church-wise that may not be good for you. I thought this isn't the church that's doing this, right?
What's right is right regardless. Don't ever let anybody talk you into that.
That's exactly it. What's right is right, and so we're still trying to talk about it because I'm concerned about their current policies, and I want to save people's lives. That's the bottom line. Then literally just not shortly after that, my son was the UVU student who was accused of yelling racial slurs by Duke
Oh
at the
yeah.
Duke BYU volleyball game,
Made
and again
international
both
headlines. Oh,
yeah both, and I wanted to sue. I wanted to file lawsuits immediately, mainly against Duke. But
sure.
my family, I mean, in that time period, Carson, my daughter had passed away. The next Christmas season on New Year's Eve, my brother, who's 4 years younger than me and that we worked together, he had a heart attack and died. 6 months later, my dad died. And I was also still working up against the corruption in my industry. So my
Yeah, it's
wife and
tough.
kids are like, please don't sue Duke right now. Like, we're just not in a state to have another big thing.
God.
And so you will see. I mean, now we're coming. I mean, maybe we'll still do it. They deserve it, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
But but again, the way BYU handled it, and I don't want to go into detail of that here, and especially the way Duke handled it, was wrong. Nobody was willing to stand up and do the right thing just because it was the right thing to do. I even had family members, and I had a lot of friends who would say, "Don't go public about this because it makes BYU look bad, and it's going to be difficult for our sons and daughters to
Ooh.
get to graduate school because BYU is looked upon as because of the way they handled it." So once again, it's people willing to sacrifice my son, make him a scapegoat, not willing to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And then so Carson, last thing is our government. In the literally thousands of young people that I mentor, it used to be when I was young, like I had the hope that I could achieve the American dream, buy a house, start a
Sure.
business, be successful. And a lot of the young people I work with now, they don't even have that hope. They don't think that they're ever going to be able to own a home. And from what they've seen in my industry, I think that they think, maybe doing stuff illegally is
This is the way
okay.
to go. Well,
If
nobody
not,
ever gets
you're
in
not.
trouble for it. I mean,
Yeah, you're
nobody's
not. No
ever
one
held
does in our industry.
accountable.
No one. You get
Right.
rewarded for breaking the law, and you get punished for doing it correctly, just like the immigration policy. And so,
100%.
as I looked at it, and I looked at who had knowledge of all these situations and how it was handled, I said, if not me, then who? Our government's 34 trillion in debt. It really can't go to 40 trillion, 45 trillion, 50 trillion. And I just decided that I want to step up because I see that career politicians do the same thing. Like just like these institutions have a sense of political self-preservation. And in my opinion, the reason they didn't do the right thing at the right time is because it wasn't politically expedient for themselves or for and I don't remember I'm a BYU grad and I'm on the team.
Or for
I'm
the
here
other
to help.
people who shot their mouth off before they knew what was actually going on. I mean,
Well,
the current governor,
the
Governor
governor called my
Cox.
son, the governor called my son a racist a-hole. Yeah.
I know. I remember. And guess what? No apology. Never. I've never seen anything. We're not going to admit we're wrong. But if BYU had said something about it, they'd have thrown the governor under the bus, which they very well should have. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
quit
think
doing dumb things and we won't have a problem.
I think Governor Cox, I'd have to go read it. I think he did issue an apology. But the issue is that he even said it, right? You have
Right.
a,
Sure.
a young college kid. There's the facts haven't been released. The fact that you just jump on the bandwagon thinking that it's politically good for you
Yeah, but he
before
has
you
a
know the
history of
facts
ready,
is
fire, aim.
it's not yeah, that's it. It's ready, fire, aim. Anyway, I really feel uniquely qualified to save the United States of America. Like literally, save us.
Yeah.
I had a friend who was a sophomore in college at BYU, and I said to him, "Why did you elect a criminal to be the president of your country?" And he said, "What are you talking about? They're all criminals." And I had this sense of pride go through me. They're like, "Not in America. That's not how we roll." Well, here
Yeah.
we are, right?
Here we are.
And so the issue is, I really have been watching. I looked at all the people I'm running against. I don't trust how they'll vote. We've thought we were electing one thing in Utah in the past and got something different. That the more I've been involved, Carson, the more I realize that, especially in the Senate, it's set up to force you to vote the way the establishment wants you to vote. And it's
Yep.
going to be a rare breed of a person like Mike Lee, I believe, who goes against that. And I know that I'm uniquely qualified. I've had no political aspirations. I just want to go save America. It's not just that I can go cast the right votes, Carson. It's that I feel uniquely qualified to help with the business and marketing and branding efforts that I think the Republican Party is not doing very well on the right, and the
Oh yeah,
left is
big
doing a good
time.
job, unfortunately. And I think that I can help actually persuade other senators and perhaps other congressmen. And that's a different conversation. But I believe
Yeah.
even as the junior senator, I'm more uniquely qualified to be able to do that more than anyone who's running for the US Senate in the United States of America right now.
Yeah, no, and that's just it. But we as Republicans, don't get me wrong. I was chairman of the Utah Republican Party, but I've got my problems with the Republican Party. And one of my biggest qualms, I was the youngest chairman ever elected in the United States. I was 31 years old when I was elected to be chairman of the Utah Republican Party. I ran the whole party in the whole state, but never once did the RNC come to me and say, "Hey, how can we reach millennials? Hey, how are we going to do this? Because you are leaving a generation, telling a generation of kids that they don't matter. And now you wonder why they don't vote Republican? You wonder why they don't have these common sense principles and why they're not activating and why they're not getting out to vote, why they're not doing these things? Because you leave them behind. You know what the Democrats do? Democrats make a place for them. You know how many times I've been told, oh, you're too young. Come back when you're older. Well, if I'm old enough to go fight in a war, I'm old enough to vote. I'm pretty sure most of the founders were under 35 years old. And I'm qualified to run for president at this point. And it's like, no, we have to start telling this generation of youth, you matter. Your vote matters. Because I think this poll came out and said 60% of young Americans believe that they will never get the chance to own a home. 60%. I mean, no wonder they're making irrational decisions. No wonder they're doing things that we don't understand because they're in a position where it's zero sum game for them. They're going to work, they can barely get by as it is. They don't want to get married. They don't feel like they can have kids because they don't believe that they can actually afford it. This is under Joe Biden's policy. I mean, it is one of the biggest talking points I hear. You and I have traveled the state. Yeah, we've seen it from one end of the spectrum. You hear the border, you hear inflation and the cost of living, and everybody's third issue is a little bit different, but here in Utah is usually the public lands and the federal stuff. So, I mean, let's hit that a little bit because it's such an important topic. I mean, let's talk about the southern border for a minute. Because to me, what's happening at the southern border, there's a solution. There is a solution. Nobody's going to like it, but the Trump era policies were fantastic. But what's happening now, in my opinion, is not by accident. What's happening at the southern border is on purpose because you can't screw it up this bad on accident. You actually have to try.
I agree completely. You asking for my take on that?
Oh yeah, give me your take.
I think Joe Biden's a business partner with the Mexican drug cartels, just straight up. And if I'm not saying that he has a formal contract drawn up with them, but I mean, it's certainly, even if he did have a contract, it couldn't be working any better than it is.
Right?
So look, there's 3.3 million illegals coming in per year under the Biden administration per year. That's roughly the same size as the population of the state of Utah. So it's as
Bingo.
if you're adding the entire state of Utah and illegal immigrants every year that Joe Biden's been the president. So here's the business relationship. Joe Biden, the Democrats perceive that those illegal aliens are going to vote Democrat. And the cartels have over a 20-fold increase in human trafficking revenue and a 20-fold increase in drug trafficking revenue, fentanyl, meth, and heroin. I've been to the southern border, to the Tucson sector specifically, which is the main area where the drugs come across. I had a tour by a guy named Art DeQuedo, who's the vice president of the National Border Patrol Association.
Yeah.
And he showed us exactly how the cartels do it. He showed us where he said, when we were 8 miles off the border, he said, they know we're here because they know my truck, because they know all the Border Patrol agents' trucks. And so they intentionally will introduce in the Tucson sector alone, just that one sector, 3,300 illegal immigrants per day. Per
Per
day.
day. Just
And
to keep
so
them
they'll
busy.
introduce them in a way to clear out all the Border Patrol agents, because those Border Patrol agents, as they collect them over a long stretch, they have to drive them 2.5 hours to Tucson and process them, which could take a day.
Right.
And like the day I was there, I was going to come back and film the next day. And he's like, yeah, don't do it. The Border Patrol agents are gone. We just collected everyone. Tomorrow's drug day. That's what he said. It's the day they bring in all the fentanyl, meth, and heroin because nobody's there to stop them. And so we still went over there, but kind of like, apprehensive a little bit. But he showed us how the cartels are doing it. And I'm not the only one, I think, in Utah who realizes, I have two family friends who've lost loved ones to accidental fentanyl overdoses in the last 18 months. Now, a lot of that fentanyl, that the beginning agreements come from China, another one of
Sure.
the Biden syndicate's business
Right.
partners, and then it comes to Mexico where they finish the product and bring it in the United States. Fentanyl overdose is now the number one cause of death for Americans between age 18 and 45. Number one. It's unconscionable to me, unconscionable that Joe Biden doesn't end catch and release like
Yeah.
President Trump had done and implement the stay in Mexico policy, which is just simply if someone says, I want asylum, right now, the current policy is if you say that, by the way, 95% of those claims get dismissed. But they say, hey, we're going to get back to you sometime between 2032 and 2035. Seriously.
Sure. Yeah. We'll see you in 10 years.
In the meantime, here's a credit card, here's some money, here's a cell phone, and here's a plane ticket on us, on the American people, to anywhere you want to go. So when they come to San Pete or to
Yeah.
San Juan or to Salt Lake, and that gives the American people the opportunity to pay for their schools and for their health care.
Yep.
And so it is just shamelessly, in my opinion, it's shamelessly selling votes, knowing that the cost is American lives through the fentanyl trafficking, shackling us with debt. It's uh, it's one of the most shameful things I've ever seen in the history of American politics.
No, absolutely. And again, I say they're not doing this on accident. I mean, you can't
Huh.
botch this bad. But I think you came up with this because I'm a big solution oriented guy. It's like, okay, we know the problem now. They are pouring in. And you come home, your house is flooding. The first thing you got to do is shut off the water. And to me, that's the first order of business is stop what's happening, finish the wall, institute the remain in Mexico policy, like you
Yep.
said. That's where it starts, and they have to be do that. The Biden administration has refused to do that. And so it's back to
Yeah.
the Trump administration. I think everybody needs to know. It's a shameless plug for President Trump. Come the election time, everybody needs to show up because literally the future of your country depends on what happens at the southern border.
Agreed.
If nothing else motivates you to vote in 2024, vote because there's 3.3 million people a year coming across the southern border. They're taking away opportunities for American citizens. But again, you see a lot of people that are like, but we need the migrant worker. Yeah, this is completely different. This is an invasion happening at the southern border. This is not immigration because we as farmers and ranchers, we rely on a migrant workforce, but we go through the process and it's difficult. It's 10 months worth of paperwork. It's a lot of money spent. And then we might get them here. Maybe we got one stuck in Chile right now that we can't get over here because we're doing it right. We joke about it, but it's like, man, we could just send them to Mexico, tell them to walk across the border and we'll pick you up and you can hit your asylum thing in 10 years and you'll be fine because they're letting everybody else. You'll get a free cell phone and a credit card if you do it. And we do it jokingly, but that's exactly what's happening. And so I think that's a huge one. But when it comes to inflation, you work with a lot of these young kids and you see them, they're fresh out of college or just going into college or in college. And they're at that kind of vulnerable stage where most Americans are really struggling, especially here in Utah. The average age of Utah in here is 31 years old. And you get to see firsthand what inflation is doing to these guys. So I mean, where do we go? How do we handle it? What do you think is the solution going forward?
The best solution is you elect Donald Trump as the president and you elect me as the next senator from Utah
There you
because
go.
we're two business people who understand the economy and we'll end this in a heartbeat. So look, inflation is caused when you start spending too much, which we're doing. It causes you to start printing money, which is like the definition of when inflation is going to start happening as well. And then here we are. So and then you start enacting other policies like the Inflation Reduction Act, where you're actually intentionally taking something like fossil fuels, which is the most efficient, cost-effective form of energy, and you're saying we're going to make energy more expensive by giving a $1 to $2 trillion subsidies and other things to these less efficient forms of energy. That just makes the cost of energy go up. Again, the definition of inflation, and then you again, I said the left's good at branding. So
Yeah,
they
right.
They brand it as the Inflation Reduction Act when it's actually an act of how economists would tell you to increase inflation.
Right.
Yeah,
It
so the
was
young
it
people I
was the
work with,
antithesis to inflation reduction. I mean, that was really the answer.
look, Ronald Reagan said when and he said this is kind of the Democrats' way of doing business. He said, if it exists, then tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. If it stops moving, subsidize it. And so I say that we do the exact opposite. Instead of
Right.
the taxes, you lower the taxes. That will actually increase spending and investment. It'll be good for the American economy. We'll actually have more tax revenue if we reduce the oppressive taxes. Number two,
Not
the
only
thing
that,
Reagan
cut
said,
regulations.
cut regulation. That's number two. Stop regulating the businesses. Like seriously, cut it. And number three, end with these crony capitalist subsidies. So
Yeah.
just do what the founding fathers intended with federalism, and just get the government out of it. Let's just return to free market capitalism and have the government stop choking us. And it's particularly egregious in the Biden administration to what they're doing here in Utah. They're choking us in keeping all of our Utah lands. They're choking us in not allowing us to drill and obtain our natural resources. And then they start manipulating. The Fed starts manipulating the interest rate. It's foreseeable. You make the interest rate really low, property values are going to go really high, which they have.
Yeah.
To where you began this question, like I'm currently working with well over 1,000 young people, and I'm telling you, it's not just that they don't have faith in the American dream. They don't have faith that their elected politicians, especially in Washington, are people of principle and character. They don't even have the expectation for principle-centered leadership. And that, Carson, is the number one thing. Being that I've watched them see what's going on in my industry, being that they've watched what's going on in the world around them, my heart goes out. That's my heart and soul and my work of my life is mentoring these young people. So to see the government give them great reason to have no faith in people or the institution, that's what that really motivated me to run for the United States Senate, is to try to restore some sense of character because it matters, and principle-centered leadership. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go cut taxes, reduce regulation, restore federalism, restore the fractures in federalism, and stop with these cockamamie. I call the Green New Deal, those green things. I call it crony climate capitalism, because
That's what
I
it
think
is.
the only green that's in it, the only part of it that's green is green for the amount of money that the Biden syndicate and the crony climate capitalists make off these sham deals.
No, but when you look at them, I've said this a lot. When you look at green energy, and there's nobody out there that wants to see, I mean, farmers and ranchers, we're the original environmentalists. There's nobody that wants to see the world left in a better spot than we do, and we want to see it. But we have these things in place. I mean, you look at green energy. I mean, it's a prime example. Green energy and green vehicles don't exist. Green, we call them green vehicles, they're really not. But these green, so-called quote unquote green vehicles,
The
they
left, who's good at marketing, brands them as green vehicles.
right, right, but they're not, and they don't exist without government subsidy. And to your point you made earlier, if it can exist without that government subsidy, it shouldn't exist. When we're talking about free market enterprise, the government's
Amen.
choosing winners and losers. And when you're talking about
Amen.
trade, you're talking about trade policy, we do the same thing because, yeah,
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, we're choosing who to trade with and who to put tariffs on top of it, and we're trying to compete with other countries. I mean, I had this out with Mike Pence one day. I said he was talking, he was on the stump, and he was saying, "Hey, I want to get rid of the Trump era tariffs." And I said, "That's a huge mistake, especially coming from our industry, because yeah, you look at it. People have heard me say this before. They'll hear me say it again. When they instituted the Trump tariffs, China come back and said, "Fine, we're going to cut corn and soybean imports or exports from the United States to China," and Trump said, "Fine." Cost us 27 billion. Don't get me wrong, it hurt the corn and soybean industry, but the tariffs brought in 50 billion. So it cost us 27 billion. We made back 50 billion. We were able to bolster the economy and bolster those corn and soybean farmers in the meantime with that money, and we still made 23 billion dollars on top of that. The next year the tariffs were down, they were importing more, and now we're back to they're importing more now than they were before, and the tariffs are still in place. We have seen more tariffs instituted over the last year from Congress or put into bills than we've seen in the last 30 years. I think there is a sense coming that the United States cannot help anybody else until we help ourselves. And we're putting ourselves into a position where we can't help anybody else. Because as of next year, our servicing of our debt is going to be our biggest expenditure. It's $2.5 trillion is what it's going to cost to service the interest on our debt. So we're getting ourselves into problem and to where we can't help the rest of the world, and everybody looks to us to help the rest of the world. But I believe that this green initiative is what's really causing that. And you see a lot of folks going hook, line, and sinker into it. And don't get me wrong, we have to have some of these conversations, but where do we draw the line?
Well, I think right now, one of the places you draw the line is say we're 34 trillion in debt. And so just like Utah households, marriages, husband and wives trying to control their household budgets, or business people like me trying to balance budgets, because if we don't do it, we're out of business. It's time for the American people to wake up and realize we're on dangerous territory. Literally, what the main reason I'm running is to keep us from, to help be a part of the solution from going off the fiscal cliff. And we're really close, I think, Carson. We're really close. And
A
so
lot
where do
closer
you
than people
cut?
think we are.
You cut everywhere.
Yep.
But like, one of my opponents, Senator Curtis, or sorry, not Senator Curtis, Congressman Curtis. One of my opponents, Congressman Curtis, he 2 years ago, I think this month, he voted for a $50 billion climate study boondoggle, science and climate. And it was proposed by one of the most liberal members of the House of Representatives, someone named Eddie Bernice Johnson from Texas, Democrat, extremely liberal. And Congressman Curtis voted to speedily rush that bill through the House. Luckily, it didn't pass in the Senate. But here we are. Here we have Congressman Curtis running for the United States Senate, and we see millions and millions and millions of dollars coming from the climate change people. I mean, this is something I think Utah should talk about a little bit more. When you have outside money from PACs that are coming into a race, you got to realize there's a reason why they're giving money. There's always a reason. And think about it. It's a pretty good deal for them if they had a Republican member of the House that voted for a very liberal climate change bill, and now they're running for the Senate. It's a good deal to give them $5 or $10 million. If you can then get a senator who can help you get that same deal, that's a $50 billion deal through the Senate. But people don't like to talk about that so much. And I think that they need to.
No, and I've talked with John Curtis at length about this, and I had him on the podcast as well, and we talked about it because there's a lot of things I disagree, especially when it comes around the lines of the study and the Prove It Act. I made it well known that I think that the Prove It Act is a way into a carbon tax, and I said, you know what, if you want to institute a carbon tax on top of everything else that's already happened in the United States, like, you're wrong. You're going to crush it. And I look at agriculture and I look what's happening here in the federal control of public lands and how we farm and ranch here in the state of Utah. 67% of the state is owned by the federal government. Well, what happens when we don't meet their carbon emissions and we don't get to graze anymore? We don't get to log anymore. We don't get to have mineral extraction anymore. We don't meet what they believe or deem that we should have. We're in trouble. And I've told people, let's have the arguments, because at a level, I do agree with Congressman Curtis on a point, and it is that we put ourselves out of the conversation. These conversations are happening, and the left is 30 years ahead of indoctrinating these kids in school to come out of school believing that the climate monster is going to make it so they all die, that they'll
Yep.
never own a home. It's the climate's fault that they don't own a home. It's not the government printing money. No, it's the climate's fault that they won't have a family or own a home, and they truly believe that because they've been taught that since they were in fifth grade. And
Carson, it's because the left's really good at marketing and branding, and the right's just
sure.
falling flat.
And we just
But we
lay
need more
there and play
business people in
dead.
there to help with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. People with common sense who are like, no, enough's enough. Because in my opinion, a lot of times with the Dems, they don't have anything better to do than to meddle in other people's lives. And so they made it their life's work to mess with other people. So they brand in a way that's hard to disagree with. But these kids are coming out of school and they don't understand. And here's where I do agree, that we don't engage in the topics because we have the right answers. We do, because nobody wants to see it better than me. But let's talk about agriculture for a second. Agriculture is proven to be the only industry that has a net zero carbon emissions. But you look around the world, who is the very first people that they're demonized? It's either energy sector or it's agriculture. But if they
Yep.
want to play by their own rules, agriculture is the only net zero emission. They take out more. You look at the United States Corn Belt, it pulls out more carbon from the atmosphere than the Amazon rainforest does. So if we're going to have these conversations, by all means, let's engage in these conversations and show them that they're wrong. And we need those common sense solutions, and that's what we need to push to Washington.
That's right. And my point, you started this conversation by asking the question, where do we cut spending? And so, of course, we cut spending in earmarks, and of course, it'd be great to have single spending bills. Of course, we don't do the omnibus spending. I
Yeah.
just brought up a 50 billion, that's billion with a B, a $50 billion climate change study that Congressman Curtis voted for a couple years ago. Whether you agree with that study, the question is, when we're 34 trillion in debt, you brought up earlier our order of operations. Like, what's good, better, best? Like, what's the most important? And I would say
Yeah.
right now we have enough knowledge of climate change to realize there's not a whole lot of anything that we're going to do that's going to affect it. It looks like China is writing that policy tonight. Right now is not the time to be spending $50 billion on that, while China's like putting out 1 to 2 new coal plants a week,
Yeah.
while they get us to like implement these things that give them a tremendous economic advantage because they get us to go for these green policies because they're way more expensive. It's economic warfare, plain and
Oh, it
simple. And
is.
we're losing.
We're losing to the rest of the world and we don't even realize it. And well, some of us do, but they don't play like we're losing because when you look at China, and that's where I believe President Trump had a lot of foresight, was looking at China and saying, you know what, they're not going to hit us militarily, but they are going to break our economy. And then COVID comes along and we look at microchips and we look at things that we buy and semiconductors and things that are imperative to the survival of our country and to make the wheels go around. And we were like, oh man, we are dependent on China. We have outsourced everything to China. We
Yep.
have literally outsourced everything. But then come back another step. You know what we're doing? We're doing the same thing with our food supply. We are outsourcing agriculture to other. We have ceased to put America first. And in the as of 2019, the United States became a net importer of food, meaning we import more food than we export. And if trade were to cease today, we don't have the capacity to feed our own population. You want to tell me it's bad to have semiconductors that we can't get? Tell me it's bad that we can't have food to feed folks. You
Well
imagine
said.
what Utah and Salt Lake County looks like if they don't get food for 3 days coming into it'd be an absolute disaster. And yet nobody's putting this focus. China's buying up farmland here in Utah. They're buying up corporations, and we're allowing them to do that
A lot. They're buying
a
a
lot.
lot of land. And if you look and see where they're buying the land, near military places, it's also quite concerning. You talked
Yeah.
about the carbon emissions and how I don't like the fact that there's now a market for carbon
Yeah.
because it can be so manipulated away. This is a great example of crony climate capitalism. This is politicians politically advancing themselves that's to no benefit to the United States or to the world. And look, I'm not saying like let's not be responsible. I'm just saying that looks to me like no matter what we're doing right now, China's more than offsetting. Like the United States
Oh,
doesn't have the ability
100%.
to make policies to put them in place that's going to affect global warming. Like
Yeah.
we just don't. We don't even know how much we're affecting it, but we do know that these policies are for sure going to cripple America if we keep going down this road. They already are, and it's going to cost lives, and I think it already is.
Yeah.
And
But
it's
you
going to
talk about
benefit.
carbon as a market. I mean, they're
It's like
putting out the
ESG, right? Or
natural
D,
asset corporations. Like they are no longer hiding this. They are making it so you can trade clean air on the New York Stock Exchange.
it's ridiculous.
That is what they are. This is not no, this was people don't realize this, and this is very important that it
Yeah.
was going to the block at the New York Stock Exchange. The fact that they could buy and sell the ability to own clean air.
Look, these concepts, my issue with it is that it has nothing to do with actual productivity, profitability, or value. And that's what I'm saying about interfering with free enterprise. ESG does the same thing.
Yes.
DEI does the same thing. These things are seeds of Marxism. Literally, they are. And they're poison pills to American capitalism and free enterprise.
No, I said this in my convention speech and I'll say it again today and I'll even expound upon it. Show me one place in this country where life is better because Democrats are in charge. Then why compromise with them? Why disagree better with them? Because nothing that they do leads to productivity, to the American dream, to capitalism. It is all about the opposite. And not even that. Go look around the world. Where on this planet is life better because of these progressive ideologies and these Marxist ideologies that come along that the left is proposing here Why compromise? Why are we to this point where we think we should compromise? Because what they do, the Dems come in and they put 150% of what they want in a bill. They sacrifice 50% and they still get 100. And we as Republicans, it's time we say no. And it's time we look and say, we're not compromising with people who hate our country and whose one sole goal is to take away everybody's freedom.
One of the most common questions I get asked, Carson, is how are you going to work with the other side and be able to move forward? And I say, look, if your definition of compromise and moving forward is to say, is the end result of how you do that bankrupts America? I'm just not okay with that. I mean, because really what people are saying is, are you willing to make the political sacrifices that will allow you to pass legislation and give yourself some political stability, meaning that you're reelectable at the expense of the American economy and the American people? And I think that's how I'm translating what you're saying, Carson. Is that
Absolutely.
like you don't go work with people in the destruction of America. You don't go work with people and to pass bills that you think are morally wrong and are leading to the imminent destruction of the fabric of our country. I'm not up for that. That's the whole reason why I'm running. I want to do the opposite and use all the skills, means, money, talent that I have to try to go convince my opponent's constituents that they need to unelect their senators. And you're not going to usually do that by yelling and screaming. That'll usually
No.
consolidate them. Use do better with marketing and branding and use your time and resources when you're on TV and otherwise of using rational ideas as to why the other policies are not kind and destructive. And that's what the Republican Party is doing poorly. We've said it two or three times. And it's what
Yes.
the Democrats are doing really well. They're just lying about it. Affordable Health Care Act, that's not affordable. Inflation
Right.
Reduction Act, that's not that. Green New Deal, that's not Green New or a deal.
No.
And then if you speak up against it, what are you as a Republican? The other side's branded you as an insurrectionist, a racist, and a bigot.
Yeah.
And because we don't have marketing people or business people or branding people on our side. I have a national brand that I built from nothing. And that's what we do. We control our brand, we know what it is, and then we defend it from attacks from competitors, and we try to brand other people. We try to we try to push that out on competitors. That's the way it's done. And right now, we as Republicans get an F on our
Right.
marketing and
And we should be show and it's like I talked about earlier. We have the solutions.
Yes.
Show me any. Going back to what I said a minute ago. Show me anywhere in this country where life is better because Democrats are in charge.
How about this,
And
Carson?
why we're not screaming that from the rooftops, I don't know.
How about this? Show me the country in all of history that taxed itself into prosperity.
Right?
Ever. Not just America, anyone ever.
But but you're absolutely spot on, and that leads me kind of into the next thing because when we talk about Utah and we talk about prosperity, it only always comes back to the public lands. When anything that's worth a value in this world at some point or another comes out of the ground, it's either mined, it's grazed, it's drilled for, whatever it is, it's logged. All of those things go into making a product or making something. That's where the true value is. The true value lies in the ground. And when you lock people off that ground, you lock them from their ability to create an economy. And here in the state, the federal government is locking us 67% of the state, and they are pushing us off. They are making it difficult for us to expand our economy. They are making it difficult to grow our economy because that's what we need right now in this state is to diversify the economy. We need the ability to grow and expand that, but we don't have it because of the federal government. And with that, so where do you see us going when it comes to state control of the federal lands? Because it's going to be a long fight to get the federal lands back. But where do you see and how can we make changes when it comes to state control of this public land?
Carson is my favorite subject.
Yes.
This is my favorite subject. So we can do a whole podcast on this. So I'll
Oh,
hit
we
three
will.
things really, really quickly, and then you can tell me which ones you want to talk about. Um, First of all, Mike Lee's Housing Act. This is the smallest of them. The federal government, if you step outside your city, because you said they own 67% of the land, which they do, they also own the land that's just right outside our cities. So that makes housing really, really expensive because there's a scarcity issue of land. It also makes it where you have to put industrial stuff close to like residences. That hurts for pollution and all kinds of things. So Mike Lee's his housing act would set aside housing for just regular people, not big estates, not corporations, not businesses, but just set aside more land. That'll reduce the housing prices. Next is Senator Lee's More Pilt Act. The More Pilt Act is an act asking the Secretary of the Interior to go re um, reassess the reappraise all of Utah's land that the federal government owns, where they're making PILT payments. We call that, it's called payment in lieu of taxes, and I'm going to come to
Yep.
that in a second. And that, I call it pennies on the trillions, because they're paying just pennies of what we'd make if we had property, if we were receiving property taxes,
Sure.
or having companies that are paying taxes, state taxes. And so if the Secretary of the Interior reassesses that and reappraises the land, the federal government would not be able to afford those PILT payments. And then we'd say, that's no problem. Just give us a bunch of the land back.
Yeah, we'll
And
just start
Carson,
taking it.
when we talk about this, Carson, neither of us are talking about taking arches, right? We're
Yeah.
not talking about taking Canyonlands National Park. We're talking about the millions of normal acres that are tied up. I'm from San Juan. So when President Obama came in and he said, we're going to start the monument Bears Ears, I mean, Bears Ears land is twice the size of Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And this gets to my third point. There's actually a fourth one. In fact, I'm going to hit the third one first.
Hit them all.
The Antiquities Act. What's with that?
Sure.
The Antiquities Act
Weaponization.
is why we have Bears Ears, because the president has the authority to just go in and declare an area to be a national monument. And if you go read the wording of the Antiquities Act, it's supposed to be the smallest possible area to establish what you need for the monument. And what is
Since
that?
when
That
has the federal
into?
government adhered to the smallest possible?
So the Democrats' solution to that is that for the Bears Ears, there's no reason to establish a national monument there at all. None. That they say the smallest area that we can grab, when they already own most of Utah, is to take an area that's twice the size of Rhode
Yeah.
Island. It's
What was it,
obscene saying
2.2
that
million acres?
those of us Utahns and those of us from San Juan County, you don't understand and respect the land enough. You don't know how to take care of it, so we're gonna do it for you.
Yeah,
So
well, help you.
so
I'm from
here's
the
what happened.
government. I'm here to help.
You had Alaska and Wyoming challenge it because of how much land the federal government had, because they had powerful senators. I'm just telling you the truth. Senator Stevens in Alaska, another senator, that got them to make exemptions for Alaska and Wyoming. And in Wyoming is the best exemption. It says that before the president can no longer declare land a national monument in Wyoming. It has to be voted on by Congress.
Yeah.
Why don't we get some senators in there, Mike Lee and I, who could do that for Utah? Isn't it about high time that we get some people in there that say, yeah, that has to be voted on. You can't do that. Get Trump in there to get rid of or reduce Bears Ears and some of this stuff. Now, here's my main one, Carson. Most people don't know this, but you say that Utah owns 67% of the land, or sorry, that the federal government owns 67% of Utah. True. But when you talk to East Coast elitists or members of the House and Senate, it's not a politically popular thing to say, why don't you give Utah some of their land back? People say, no, we need to stay beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah.
This
We
is
need to
how
see
you do it.
arches and canyonlands and all those things.
This is how you do it from a marketing branding standpoint. And I've done this now with sitting members of Congress and the Senate, not from Utah. This is what you say. You say, do you know how much land the federal government owns in Texas, Kansas, Maine, New York, Oklahoma? And they'll say, no. You go, less than 2% in each state. Did you know that I believe it's 34 states east of Colorado, the federal government owns less than 2%? And they go, really? Yeah. I go, yeah, Utah's got some beautiful area. So in Utah, what do you think's the amount that the federal government should own in Utah? And so they'll always try to choose a high number. And
Like 10.
every time, Carson, they've chosen a number between 20 and 35%. And
Double
so then
that.
you go, well, they own 67%. And you can see even senators and members of the House, they get wide-eyed. And then you start appealing to their sense of fairness. And if the senators and congressmen won't do it, you could craft an amazing marketing branding campaign to their constituents that show the unfairness, because each state had an enabling act. And in the enabling act, the federal government said, we will sell the land back to the states, and you get to use that land to pay for taxes, to pay for the property taxes are used to pay for schools.
Yeah.
And so they did that. That's why all those 34 states, the federal government owns like 2% of the land. When they got to Colorado and then Utah, they said, we don't want to give you your land back anymore. And it's the East Coast elitists who say, we already have our states. Now we want to control yours.
Yeah.
That should be very offensive to everybody in Utah. So they passed FLTMA, which says, we're not going to sell you the land back anymore. We are fundamentally going to do something that's entirely un-American and treat these states completely different to these states at the detriment of the kids' education. It's obscene. And why are we not marketing? Why is not everybody that's running for the Senate? This would be the thing that I'm telling you. I will put together a campaign and go get our land back. I will appeal to the American people and the members of the Senate and the House who won't get behind it. I'll make their constituents go against them. Nobody has explained this clearly, concisely, with good branding and good marketing. I will go get our land back. And I'm going to do it. Like I said, I'm going to do it for good marketing and good branding. That it is so un-American and so obscene. And that is the reason why our taxes, our real tax rates so high in Utah compared to other states. Do you know, Carson, that the real tax rate for Utah, just the state rate, is the 11th highest in the country?
In the country, absolutely.
And all 10 states above us are blue. They're all Democrats. Even Mitt Romney's Massachusetts has a lower real tax rate, state tax rate,
No, but
than
things are
Utah
good
has.
here. Things are good. All's well in
You,
Zion, man. So it's just
hey, if you want a fighter and someone that knows this to go get it done, put me in the Senate. I will go get our land back. I will go get our land back.
and that's what it's going to take, because if Utah's going to survive in the future, it's going to require us to have state control of our federal lands or our land back. That's just all there is to it, because we know how to manage it. We know better than somebody 3,000. Most of these people, who the range managers who put together the forest plans and the fire mitigation, all of these people, you know what they've done? They read a book once. They went to college and they read a book, never set foot on these lands. They don't know what they look like. They've seen a topo map if they're lucky. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know how to manage it. It goes back to what Reagan said, that federal government is somebody 3,000 miles away who knows better how to run something in your backyard than you do. And that's where we have come. And that's what the federal government has become. They can't even handle themselves, let alone the three-letter bureaucracies and the unelected bureaucrats that are out there, because most of the time it's them causing problems. The unelected bureaucrats, it's time to end the bureaucracy. And I believe that President Trump, another shameless plug for President Trump here today, he will put he's as good of a chance as we have to stop the corruption in the bureaucracies as we've ever had. Because as we've
Well, I
seen
mean,
over the last week, the FBI is colluding with everybody to get rid of Trump in the last election. They're using the CIA to do whatever they want at this point. So who do we trust?
yeah, it's a sad day when you see the government, Joe Biden weaponizing the government against his political opponents, which most of my friends on the left actually agree and are pretty actually concerned, because they love America too, but they're concerned about what they're seeing. But I've never seen a president or a presidential candidate who's been more persecuted and maligned in the history of America than President Trump. Whether you like
Absolutely.
President Trump or not, every American should look at that and say, why did the Democrats not go after him with the Stormy Daniels thing right after he got out of office? Why did they wait until right when he needed to campaign
Yeah.
and then make sure they're going to put him in court right as he's going into campaign? That is a threat to American democracy. It is really bad. Near as I can tell, maybe the main record that Donald Trump holds is he's probably the only person to be convicted of anything in the state of New York in the last year.
It's the only person they rushed it through and actually enforced. And even then, you
But you
ask
can
them,
rob
okay,
stores in New York. You can rob
right?
stores. That's no problem.
What was it he said he could shoot? Trump said sometime he could shoot somebody in the middle of 8th Avenue and nobody would care. Probably could have even been there. But the thing is, here's the problem. They are doing whatever they can to prevent Donald Trump from getting back into office. And why is that? Because we saw what good, strong policy can do to our country. It stabilized the middle class. It made our country a formidable opponent to the rest of the world. Because guess what? When we're weak, we're easy prey for people like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, because they don't even hide it anymore. It's on the front page of their thing. They want to make it all one big thing, and they want the United States to default, and they want us to stumble, and that's so that they can pick up. But it was
Well, Carson, the
zinky.
more that we go into debt, and the more our dollar gets devalued, and the more we weaken ourselves, the more we adopt Marxist policies, but especially when we hamper our businesses by making decisions that make inflation go up, increasing regulations that make business not be able to prosper, increase taxes, which chokes everyone. The truth is I think that's what China wants, and I think that that's what all of people who aren't friendly to America wants, and they're going to get their way. Now, if we
Yeah.
turn our economy around with just lowering taxes, getting inflation under control, stimulating the economy, decreasing regulations, helping things that are going to give those economic incentives for people to invest and to consume, then we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And it's going to give us more validity as we need to leave the UN and leave WHO and leave these these European and foreign bodies. And I'm not talking about NATO when I say this. I'm talking about the UN and WHO and other people who are trying to who are trying to basically control and cripple America.
Right.
And they're using our own tax dollars and our own money to do it.
Well,
So we
well,
should be
they're
better at talking about it.
yeah, well, they're increasing regulations and they're increasing rules that we never voted on and that we as American citizens are not privy to. And Zenke from Montana, he was speaking at a deal once, and I think he said it best. He says, when the United States stumbles, nations fall. And I believe that we are on that precipice, that we are stumbling. And I wish we could say that that wasn't the case, but we have an opportunity, I believe, to turn this ship around before it's too late. Because I'm an eternal optimist. And I asked Mike Lee one day, I was sitting with him, and we were both kind of beat. It was during his campaign, and we were both sitting in the corner after an event, just he and I talking. And we sat down and we talked about it. I said, Mike, why do we keep doing this? This is horrible and it's terrible. It seems like we're just beating our head against the wall. And I said, well, why do we keep doing it? And he says, because what else are we going to do? It is very simple, but it really stuck with me. It's like we don't have a choice. Well, there's nowhere else for us to run. There's nowhere for us to move. There's no way to get away from us, and the world is going to suffer for what we are doing here. And that's why I get involved. I believe that's why you get involved. And I think that that is the way forward, is to just keep trying. But the time is over for disagreeing better. The time is over for compromising our way through. The time is now to stand up for something we believe in. To your point earlier, I was sitting with a legislator here in Utah, and I dearly respect this guy. He was a younger person at the time. And we were sitting in his office, and they put a bill forward. He says, man, if I don't vote for this thing, they're going to get rid of me. They're going to unelect me. And I sat back in the chair and I looked at him and I said, right there. I says, I want you to put this in your mind right now. I said, the second you start making decisions based on whether or not you're going to get reelected, you've lost it. And he sat back in his chair and just kind of slumped there. And he says, you're absolutely right. He voted against it, stuck to his conscience, and they elected him again just fine. And too often we see politicians who do that. It's, I got to do what I've got to do to hold my seat. It's important. The second you see a politician who needs politics in their life, who makes it a part of them, it's time to get rid of them,
Well said.
because they will compromise what they believe to keep it. You want people are like, why do you want to run for politics? I said, no, no, no. That is not the question you need to be asked. Want is a terrible word. If anybody wants politics, they're in it for the wrong reasons. If you feel like you should do it, if you feel like you can make a change, contribute to society, absolutely. But if you want it or you need it, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah, if you're saying if not me, then who, like I'm doing and like you're doing, that's probably a little bit more healthy, right? I mean,
Absolutely. And our country was founded on it.
hey, if I'm elected to the Senate and you're giving me spending bills that I believe that shouldn't be voted on, and I know with 100% certainty that that's going to be have me voted out of office, then vote me out of office. That's a badge of honor I'll wear for the rest of my life, and so my posterity will be proud of me.
Absolutely. No, and that's it right there, man. But we're running shy on time. Where do people find you? What do you leave them with your last appeal? We're coming up on the primary here. Everybody's filling out their ballots. Why you?
Yeah, well, it's you find me at Walton for Senate. That's Walton FOR Senate. That's .com. It's Instagram. It's on X. And please follow. If you like what you hear, then please donate. If you like what one of my components are saying, then please donate to them. But let's jump in and do our civic duty. We stand with people by making donations. I'm the only political outsider in this race. So I was an average Utah, born where I paid my way through college, was supporting my parents and some of my siblings by the time I was 27, 28. I did not have a silver spoon in my mouth, and I was blessed to be a citizen of the United States of America, and I've lived the American dream and had the opportunity to mentor hundreds, if not thousands, in living their American dream. I literally am like the average American, and if you relate to this, who is tired of electing politicians saying they're going to do one thing and do another, who sits around feeling a high level of stress, looking at the border and looking at our national debt and realizing career politicians keep doing this. They keep lying to us and they keep doing this. That's what got me up and throw my hat in the ring, invest my own money And a lot of it, they say in a ham and egg breakfast that the chicken's involved, but the pig's committed. So I'm committed. I put my own capital in. Some of my opponents right now are actually paying themselves back with the donations that you're sending them. And so I'm committed, and I'm committed literally to saving the United States of America. As I've traveled around Utah and people have got to know me and realize I'm a blue collar business guy, that's literally that my frustrations are genuine. It's the same frustrations that they had, that I don't have political aspiration to go up the ladder, but I have a unique capacity to maybe go bully some senators in Washington to make the changes that need to be done. Maybe I'm more specifically able to do that than anyone running for the Senate right now in all the United States. It's I've found that Utahns, it's like bringing them a cold glass of water to someone who's dying of thirst in the desert. And if that message resonates with you, then please come stand with me and learn more. Go to Walton for Senate, and if you like it, then make a donation. And I ask for your vote.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've said it before. I'll say it again. I don't ever really endorse folks that take something different because I want everybody to go do their homework. Go do your research. Go research these folks. Go look into them. Make your own decision because informed voters are what's going to change this country. And if everybody paid attention here in Utah, we have a problem. And that is that more people take the time to decide between Coke and Pepsi than who to vote for. And that's gotten us into the situation we're in. That's caused problems where we're at as a country. And it's going to be greater voter turnout. It's going to be voter information. And that's why it's so important. So go learn what you can, fill out your ballots. Time to get involved. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me, Jason. Appreciate it. And we'll see y'all soon.